So I'm excited for this one. This is one that Chase found. It's a woman that he knows. Her name is Michelle Tanner. She's a local resident here in St. George, Utah, and just a beast. Mother of 2 children, wife, and then very active in the city council and politics, and a CEO of a business here in town, and just a powerhouse. You know, I love talking to people who are just doing more, accomplishing more, pushing themselves. And especially I wanted to talk to a politician. That is a very thankless job. And so I'm excited to jump into this one. So Chase set it up, and we're going to jump into this. Again, this is Michelle Tanner, and let's see how this goes. Jeez, it's different. You've changed it up. So I've been gone for the last few months.
Where have you been?
Road trip to the U.S. So a little bit about me, because we've never met. So I sold my construction company at age, I lost everything in the recession. I had started a company when I was 25, built it up, lost it in the recession, lost everything, built it back. And then I ended up selling it and had some vacation rentals at that time at age 36. And then the following year, I was actually 36, February of 17, I left and went traveling with my wife and kids, 2 at the time. And we've been traveling full time for the last 8.5 years.
Oh, I love that.
So
jealous.
Oh, I lost my audio. Sorry. There it is. Yeah, I'm back. So that's kind of my little story is, worked hard, lost everything, learned my lessons, created investments and passive income. And then we've been traveling for the last 8.5 years. So we've been to 70 something countries.
That is so amazing.
Yeah. So
that
it's been cool. It's been a really good ride. And so we just got back. We left my little girl was born January 9th. They told us not to leave until March 9th. So we left I think we left March 10th. And road trip to the U.S. for a month and a half. Or a month.
So do you do a motorhome when you do that, or are you just straight road trip and stay hotels?
Airbnbs okay. Yep. I did the math on it back in the day, and it was a lot more affordable and more what's the word? Like, I'm in a little tiny SUV, not a huge motorhome.
More
versatile,
realistic, economical,
whatever.
Yeah.
And so we had done it before and hit 40. I can't remember. I think 41 states, and we had 9 left. So we went through 18, got our 9, and then we went to Costa Rica for a month.
So cool.
And just got back last week.
Well, welcome back.
Yeah. So a little bit about me, but anyway, so basically going through your resume and what you do. So you're Michelle Tanner. I'll give an intro later on this and go through that, but I have Michelle Tanner here in studio. So you're here from St. George. Are you born in St. George?
So not born in St. George. My ancestors, however, were amongst the first to settle St. George.
Oh,
so definitely my roots
That's
are
like my
here.
wife too. My wife's ancestors settled it, but she's from Kaysville.
Yeah.
So where are you from?
So I was born in Rapid City, South Dakota on Ellsworth Air Force Base because my dad was Air Force.
Love it. My dad was Army.
Awesome.
Yep.
And then we did live in Texas for a bit as a child, but then we moved back here when I was 6 years old. So all of my grade school years, I was here in St. George. So this is definitely home.
What high school did you go to?
Pineview.
Oh, so did I.
Awesome.
I was going to say, what year did you graduate?
So I was 06.
Okay, so I was 98. So I'm
okay, so a few years difference.
Yeah. So that's awesome.
You may have known like Clint Hardy.
Yeah, I know
So that's
Clint.
my brother.
Okay, yeah.
Well, there's 2 Clint Hardys, so I don't know.
Here we go.
I know. There are 2 Clint Hardys. Mine was the wild and crazy one.
Yeah, I probably knew him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Strobels are my step siblings. So if you
I
knew
moved
like
here
Tim
when I was
Strobel.
14, so I was kind of late, but that doesn't ring a bell.
Okay, because some of my brothers are your age.
Yeah. So born in where's South Dakota?
South Dakota.
And then went to Texas and then here at 6. And so this is pretty much, I moved here when I was 14 and I was born in Cedar. And then we went to Vegas and ended up here, but beautiful area. I love it.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. And so a little bit about you, and I'll let you answer this, but you're heavily involved in politics. right? You're on the
Yes.
city council
St.
of
George
St. George?
City Council.
Okay.
Yep.
And then you have a podcast as well.
Yep. The Michelle Tanner podcast.
I love it.
I've taken a little break recently, but I'm sure
we
I'll
talked
be
about
at
that.
it
We
at
talked
some
about
point.
that.
But again,
It's
yes.
it's hard, you know, it's one of those things where I actually didn't want to do it. So I came back from travels to have another baby. My wife's like, I want another baby. I'm like, really? Are you sure?
Come on.
I thought we were done. I thought we were good. And she's like, no. So we came back to have another baby, and I was talking to my buddy, Ryan Mickler. And I says, hey, I want to start a company where I've been traveling the last 8.5 years. It's my passion is to see the world and experience things and taste new food and try new things. And I'd like to start a company up. And so that's where M42 Adventures came about, was that concept. But I told him, I says, when I traveled for the 8 years, my Instagram and everything was private. I didn't post anything. I was very, very private about it.
Yeah.
And so I totally understand where you're coming from as far as the podcast and all those things. It's a love-hate, like we talked about, right? I love having these conversations and meeting new people, but you're busy. You got things going on. Exactly.
Yep. Takes time. It's a hobby for sure.
Yeah. And this is, yeah, exactly. So tell me, you're in high school, you graduate. Wow. Where did you go from there? Like tell me your story.
Yeah. So graduated from Pineview High School, met my husband actually right after I graduated. So kind of your typical Utah story of, he's right home from a mission. He's from Northern Utah.
Where did he go on a mission?
He went to Minnesota.
Okay.
He's from Heber City, Midway area, and had just moved down here, and we met on a blind date. And we did date, though. We've actually dated for 2 years before we got married. So that's not
normal.
Typical here.
Especially for a return missionary.
Right.
Good.
But I started working at 17 in a doctor's office as a medical assistant. Well, started in their file room, moved up to a medical assistant, and started seeing what the doctors and the PAs were doing. And I thought, they're doing the fun stuff. I want to do that. And so I jumped right into a nursing program. Got my RN degree from Dixie State University. And then I just kept going on because I knew that I wanted more autonomy. I wanted more freedom. I'm huge on freedom in all aspects of life, which is why you are super inspirational. That freedom of being able to just travel and live the way you truly want to live with that financial freedom. And so I went on and got a bachelor's degree from BYU, Idaho.
Do you have kids?
I do. Yep.
So did you have kids at this time trying to juggle?
During that time, I waited. Actually, we were married for 7 years before we had my oldest.
Again, not very Utah thing to do.
But
that's what I did. I was 7 years.
Yeah, and because we were actually
just enjoying it and doing your thing.
And we were like, are we even going to have kids? I wasn't that like, I just want to sit home and have 10 kids. That just wasn't my personality. And so, but my son was very insistent that he was coming to this earth. So I had a lot of dreams about him before I ever had him.
Wild. That's cool.
And that's a whole other story in itself. But I definitely
my
knew
wife
he was
always
coming.
says that. She says when we got married, before dating, she says, I've got kids up there telling me they're coming, and I'm like, I'm good at that.
Yeah.
But that's cool that you experienced that.
Yeah, it's a real thing.
That's a big deal.
So we were living in Vegas at the time. I was in my master's program at that time. I'm a nurse practitioner. And so that's when I had my oldest, who's now 11, when we were living in Vegas. And that was an interesting time of life, having him and working full-time as a nurse at the time, in grad school, trying to do my clinical rotations for my nurse practitioner degree. And so that was definitely a wild time of life there, but we got through it, and things really haven't slowed down since. I think that's so funny. We think, if I can just get through this, then things will calm down. If we can just get through this, but in my life anyway, things never calm down. I find stuff, I guess, to keep me busy.
Yeah, I was actually talking to my wife about this last night. I was talking to Chase because I was supposed to be gone until the end of May, and then I was supposed to come home for a few days and then leave again. We ended up coming home a couple weeks early because I've got some other business things that popped up. And I was telling him yesterday what was happening. And he's like, the things you get yourself into. And I'm like, it's all self-inflicted.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm aware.
Guilty.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, sounds like you're in the same boat where you kind of want the freedom, you want that. But at the same time, it's like, I kind of need to look at this over here, and you go down that road and it can turn into something pretty quick.
Yeah, for sure. And so, yeah, we lived in Las Vegas for about 5 years. And then I was offered a position up here in St. George in the emergency department as a nurse practitioner. And so I jumped on that, and we moved back when my son was about 3 years old. And yeah, I've worked in the ER for about 10 years. And my littlest one, Dakota, was born almost 5 years ago. So
You have 3?
I have 2.
Okay, 2. Okay.
Yep. And so that's a whole other story
Surprise.
because that was 2020.
Oh, yeah.
Which, if anyone remembers what
That's when I had
happened in
mine.
2020.
Yeah. You're bored.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, I got pregnant with her in 2019.
Okay, so you're all right.
But delivered.
My third one came during COVID, and it's like, we can't go outside. What are we going to do?
5 friends that all came during COVID.
Yeah.
Or at least we're,
there's going to definitely be a little.
Yeah, lots of COVID babies.
Yeah, for sure.
And so at that time, I had already started my business, my current business, which is called Bella 2 Medical. So I've had that for now, I think that's about 7-8 years. And it started out very small as just kind of doing cosmetic injections on the side while I was still working in the emergency department. But actually, when COVID hit, it was very handy that I already had that business up and going because as a medical professional, I realized very quickly the censoring of science that was happening, the propaganda that was being pushed, and the improper treatment really with patients not being able to get access to alternative treatments that in any other time throughout history, never had I been told that I wasn't allowed to prescribe a medication off label. We do it all the time in medicine. But all of a sudden during COVID, I wasn't allowed to prescribe ivermectin.
Right.
Interesting.
Right. Sell what we want you to sell.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's a whole other conversation that we can delve into if you want.
Right.
But it was really nice that I had my business set up because I immediately started doing telemedicine all across the country, helping patients that their doctors were refusing to refill their insulin because they weren't getting a shot. They didn't want a shot. They didn't want an experimental shot. So their doctors were refusing to see them.
Right.
So I was helping get these medications refilled. I was helping treat patients with alternative options such as ivermectin.
That's awesome.
Doing IV infusions.
I had to get mine. I got some, and it was from Mexico.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
a lot of
Wayne, I have a contact in Yuma.
Yeah.
And he sent us a whole bunch of it from Mexico.
Yeah.
I still have it. I didn't ever have to take it, but we had to go, around America to get it.
Yeah,
You know?
it's so
crazy.
wild what we all witnessed during that time. And, at that point in time, I hadn't been super involved politically. I would just call myself the average American where I love freedom, love America, love the Constitution. But I was busy raising my kids, my family, not even thinking that I would need to actually get involved in politics.
Yeah,
right?
most people don't. Most people,
Right.
like me, I can't stand it. I just can't even stand it. But all the time we have these conversations usually around hunting camps, and I'm like, this is the country is a mess. And they're like, do something about it. I'm like, well, I really admire that you did something. You did it. Most people talk and, for lack of a better word, bitch.
Right.
And,
yeah, it's true. They yell from the sidelines.
Yeah. So you jumped in. What did you do? How did you first get involved?
Yeah. So for me, 2020, as that
Opened your eyes.
medical professional, I'm having my eyes opened of like, wow, I just always trusted the CDC.
This is corruption.
This is so corrupt, the way they're going about this. And so my tipping point of actually vocally starting to state my opinion was when here locally they implemented the mask mandates in our children's schools. Because I knew the data wasn't there to support that.
Right.
Scientifically, it didn't make sense. Not to mention the constitutional aspect of,
Freedom.
is it right to mandate what goes on someone's face?
Right.
So that's what really pushed me to make a public statement about what I believed was incorrect that they were pushing onto our kids. And I had to make a very conscious decision when I put that out publicly because I knew it wasn't going to be a popular opinion.
Right.
If you recall at the time, any medical professional who dared to speak against the mainstream, we were immediately painted as this crazy person, conspiracy theorist. I had so many people telling me I should lose my license. I got reported to, I was still working in the emergency department, had the head of the hospital here call me and say, tell me about this post. I'm like, show me the data. Show me where you should be able to force a mask on my child. My tax dollars pay for these schools.
Right.
Tell me how that's okay.
Right.
So my mama bear came out and I wasn't going to take it. And so that's what really spurred me into politics. And then I knew they were going to mandate the shot. I absolutely knew it in my bones, even a year before they actually did it.
I always hoped Utah, would not.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, so when you had our governor,
You kind of
With our governor,
exactly.
yeah, you had our governor and lieutenant governor going out literally publicly encouraging businesses to force employees to get this experimental shot, which at the time, again, working in the emergency department, I was breastfeeding my baby. Breastfeeding women were excluded from medical trials, so it hadn't even been tested in my group. I had already had COVID, and at the time, we already had studies showing that if you had already had COVID, there was increased risk with getting the vaccine with things like myocarditis, strokes, blood clots. How in the world
Can you force this?
would it make sense for our own governor to be out there telling employers that they should force this on someone in order to provide for their families? That's a big deal.
Right.
And so I ended up refusing to get the shot. I was immediately removed from the schedule in the emergency department. And again, thankfully, I had my business going on the side. And so I think a lot of others who also didn't get the shot, they went the religious exemption route. But for me, it was a statement of, no, I'm not refusing this because of my religion. I'm refusing this because it makes no sense. It makes no sense scientifically. It goes against everything that I believe to get this shot. And so I was eventually officially terminated after holding a very peaceful protest in front of the hospital where about 1,000 people came.
Wow.
And I mean, we're talking doctors from the hospital were out there with me.
Did they lose their jobs?
So not that I'm aware of, because most did a
They're
religious
needed?
exemption.
Oh, I see.
No, they
I
did.
see.
They did a religious exemption.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it was a really interesting time. But also during that time, it is when I was elected to the St. George City Council, because I decided we get so overwhelmed oftentimes with what's going on at the federal level. And COVID was such a classic example of how really here at the local level is what has the most influence over our day-to-day lives.
100%.
Like if we can't help be a voice at our own local level, we don't have a chance at the federal level. It's got to be, people focus so much on this top-down approach, but it's really from the bottom up that we are going to restore
Where you live.
America.
Yeah,
it
it's
is.
where
It
you-
is
yeah,
our
yeah.
local communities.
Right.
And so that's where my passion came to serve on the local level, was assuring that we are doing everything we can to really strengthen and solidify and fortify our walls here in our own local community, despite what's going on in the rest of the country.
Right. So you had been let go. How soon after that did you get on the city council?
So I was officially terminated actually a few weeks after I was elected
Oh, really?
to office.
Okay.
I'd
Okay.
already been removed from the schedule a few weeks before I was elected. And then the official termination came shortly after I was elected.
Okay. So what were you elected? What role do you have on the city council?
So St. George City Council, I'm one of 5 council members.
Okay.
And it's at large, so it's not a specific district. It's all of St. George that I represent.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we all...
Do you know, I don't know what role, what's Ben's last name? He was in Washington.
Martinson.
Yeah, do you know
He's
him?
my cousin.
Is he? I love him.
Ben.
Dude.
Yes.
He's in my, we talked about this. I don't go to church, and you guys kind of got on me about that.
Hey,
That's
there's no
okay.
judgment here. Trust
I'm
me.
just
We
kidding.
were more about the chosen. You
That's
never
right.
I
did.
was
That's
worried
right.
about the chosen.
That's right. That's right.
Had nothing to do with church.
Yeah, it was PTSD on my part. But Ben's in our ward. and
Oh,
Ben
okay.
and Jen.
I
And
thought he moved down
he
to
did
Mesquite.
now.
Okay.
Yeah, they were in our ward, and they moved down
Gotcha.
too. Which I never went to that ward, so they live by me.
Yeah.
Is basically how you say that in
Yeah.
Utah.
Neighbors.
But I love him. He's a good dude.
He
and
is such a good
So was
guy.
he was on city council, right? Is
He was
kinda
in
a similar-
Washington,
Is that a
Washington
similar
City.
role?
Yep, exact same role, only he was in Washington
Okay,
City.
okay.
Yeah, so the legislative branch essentially of the city.
Okay.
So we do all of the local ordinances and laws.
Yeah, I loved having him on there. It's one of those things where, I'm very like you. I'm very patriotic. When I first left in February of 2017 for our travels, I bought a one-way ticket to France. We rented a car. We were in Paris for like 2 hours, and we drove to Normandy.
Wow.
That was the top place
so
on my
cool.
bucket list.
Yeah.
Was Normandy. I'm like, I want to go sit on those beaches. And we went out there for a week, and that's how I started my 8.5 years of travel. So I'm very patriotic. I actually started a clothing line called Undaunted Apparel in Vegas. I grew up in Vegas, and it's still in business today. I've since sold my equity, but we donate 10% back to military charities.
Awesome.
It's been in business for 13 years now. We use them on all of our apparel here. And so I'm very, I've grown up. My dad was in the Army. He passed away at age 28
Wow.
on base in El Paso from a brain aneurysm, just a freak
Wow.
accident. I wasn't born. My mom was pregnant with me.
Wow.
So kind of a crazy way to come into the world. But those have always been my heroes. People who died protecting our freedoms. It's like those,
Yes.
when I thought of Undaunted, I was in the hospital here in St. George. It was actually when it was on, 700? I don't know.
Where
the
I
old
was born.
hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, 400 East.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, 500 South.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking, and on the TV came, like, I think it was the Kardashians or something, and I'm like, why do we idolize this? What is happening? We should idolize, our soldiers and our first responders, and so that's my background. And so
Yeah.
it's been so disheartening. I said this before Trump, but like a year ago, I've just lost faith. I just don't trust anything. And I never thought that I would say that about my government. I've been all over the world, all these countries. I always say America's the best. I still believe it is. But we lost our way.
Yeah.
And so, to see that you guys will step up and jump, like you and Ben and jump into these roles. And I always just liked having Ben there. It was just a comfort. You would tell Gina, it's funny because I'm just like, I don't really know what's going on in Washington City, but if Ben's over there, I know he's fighting what I would probably prefer.
Right.
He's got my values.
Yeah.
And that's, it's just, I can't even imagine putting myself into that, like you have. It's got to just be.
It's weird that you bring that up because I kind of feel that same way about Michelle. I'm like, there's all kinds of shenanigans going on in St. George, but at least Michelle's there.
I appreciate the faith.
Yeah, well, looking at your page, it's like I can obviously tell you're a stark Democrat, right?
Well, if you ask some people as of the last week, they're not super happy about this chair race we just had in, in the Utah Republican Party, which we can delve into that if you want to, but it's kind of funny because people in politics oftentimes forget to check themselves. Like, we have to constantly be looking in the mirror. We should be constantly looking in the mirror to make sure that we are not doing the very behavior that we are accusing the other side of doing, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen that here in Utah politics, especially these last couple of weeks with this GOP chair race we just had where, I have always been a solid conservative. I don't know how anyone could accuse me of anything otherwise because it's in the way I vote. It's in the way I act. It's, just a part of who I am. And in this particular chair race, I chose to endorse a specific conservative candidate that, for whatever reason, this other side decided he is not a conservative, even though he is. And so they've chosen to paint anyone who endorsed him as rhinos. And I'm telling you, I have not been called this many names since a couple years ago when I had the left heavily at me for saying that, it's inappropriate to have adult entertainment in front of children,
Right.
which spurred a lot of controversy from the left. But now it's interesting to see it coming from the right simply because they don't see a specific candidate in the same way that I see it. But I mean, that's part of politics where there's a lot of name calling and it's not productive. And like you said, that lack of trust is so missing in society today. And we have COVID a lot to blame for that.
Absolutely.
And I guess silver lining, it's good that a lot of that corruption came to the surface so that it could wake a lot of us up. But we also have to be smart in the way that we are going about things and not just attack, especially those people who we do elect to represent us. Let's find ways to work together rather than to just constantly be tearing everybody down.
There's a reason why they say don't talk about religion and politics at the kitchen table, right? It is so decisive that it's shocking, and it's like you said, I'm, probably lose a few followers, but I'm sure they know where I stand,
Sorry if I'm over here making you lose followers.
No, I don't. I honestly, my wife always says, she'll post stuff all the time that's just blunt. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm just going to cleanse my followers today. And I'm like, okay.
Oh, your wife and I would be friends. I can already tell.
Yeah. So it's fine. But yeah, it's one of those things where it is, I lost my train of thought now. What was I saying?
Just with not talking politics, religion, because it can become divisive.
It's so divisive. And it's like, there's a reason why we don't, but at the same time, I'll go to California and I have a couple buddies down there and we're really good friends, but we don't see eye to eye on politics. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was in Costa Rica with them and we were sitting by the pool and it was when Biden was pulling out the whole mess in, where we left all the machinery.
Oh yeah. Afghanistan. Yep.
And I'm
epic failure.
Oh my heck. I'm in the pool and I'm reading the news. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, soldiers are dying, I get very riled up. And he comes walking out. And he's like, what's going on? I'm like, you read this crap? I'm like, your buddy, is doing this. And he starts defending him. And I says, stop talking because we will not leave Costa Rica friends.
Right.
But that's how divisive it can be. It's such a scary thing right now because it's never been, I don't think, so polar opposite.
Yeah.
And, I don't know where it goes from here, or how you solve that, because I don't know that it's going to get better.
Well, and so many things that used to not be politicized and political have become that way because, prior to 2020, even though I was still very much, principled and set in my beliefs and my core values, I had friends from all sides of the aisle, and I still do to an extent, probably not as many as I once did because, not everyone can handle, I guess, my opinions, which is fine. I can handle theirs. So it's kind of on them, I guess, if they choose not to be friends. But this is how naive I was when I came out and started publicly speaking for medical freedom. I did not realize that was like a political thing. I thought everybody wanted freedom. I thought, why would anyone want to be forced to get a medical treatment that, was already showing it didn't stop contraction, it didn't stop transmission? It's like, why would that not be a choice to weigh your own risks versus benefits? How is that political? But, I learned very quickly, it is very politicized.
Yeah, that's a good point because I get it with hunting.
Yeah.
It's like I like hunting. I enjoy going out there. I just made ceviche last night I have a fishing boat in Alaska.
Awesome.
And we go up every year. We take, I'm taking 18 people this year. It's just a private boat. We just go fishing with friends. And I made a whole bunch of ceviche last night. And it's like, I have so much meat in my freezers from all these animals. And it's just a part of me and I enjoy it. I enjoy camping. I enjoy being in nature. But when you talk about it, it becomes political. It's like, oh, you hunt, you're a Republican. And I'm like, how? But it is. I'm sure 90% are. But I'm like,
how to have a good time. That's how we know you're a Republican.
Yeah, I agree. But it's like that's what is so. I've never thought of it that way because I just have thought of it as political, which is sad because it really shouldn't be. It should be like, do you like to put food on your table that is, harvested out in the mountains? Who wouldn't want that if you could?
Right.
Have you ever seen a coyote kill a deer? It's a lot worse than how I kill it. If you're worried about the animals struggling. But yeah, it's an interesting point that you say that because I've never really connected the dots. But there are so many things in our like guns, right? He's our firearm instructor at M42.
She's been to one of my courses.
Okay, yeah, and it's like that's political.
Yeah,
it's like I want to know how to defend my family if somebody breaks into my house.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going bear hunting tomorrow, and I'm taking my 3 boys. We're not killing anything. We're just chasing them. Easy people. But I told my wife, my oldest is almost 14. He's been to 3 of your classes?
Yeah.
Two or three, and he won one.
Yeah, he won the bullseye contest.
And I says to Gina, I think he could wear a pistol.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I don't want him having a gun, and she's around him and she's believes how I believe, but she's just like, I'm worried. And I'm like, I want him to know how to defend himself. If a bear came at him, I'd love that he could protect himself. I trust him with it, not just giving him a gun. He's
good with it.
But
better than some of the adults I trained, to be honest with you.
But and I hate to say that this is maybe our last podcast, but we're driving down the road and I says, you're acting like a Democrat to my wife, and I have all my kids in the back seat, and this is the funny part. My 4-year-old Locke,
I love that kid.
Says, Dad, we don't say Democrat. That's a bad word. And I'm like,
that is, have raised
and I'm like,
your
I'm a
kids
good parent,
right. You
but
knew it.
Proud dad.
Yeah.
We just lost followers, but
yeah. Sorry guys, but anyway, it is weird how some of these things do turn political, but which is they have the same defense on the other side, right?
Yeah.
They can say, I was just trying to have a drag queen. I'm sure that's
Party.
what we're talking about, right? Down to the drag queen thing. Was that it was?
Oh yeah, front of kids,
I had a specific.
That's what I'm saying. It's like they're probably just like, we're trying to do this. It's not political.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not saying it's political. I'm saying it's wrong. It's morally wrong.
Yeah.
And so I don't know whether we're bringing up the politics when it fits our narrative or not, but it should be right and wrong. And that's where I have this. That's where my parents are. My dad's a cowboy. Has a ranch. And obviously going to be a Republican. I don't know.
That's where it fits in.
Pretty
I don't know.
easy assumption,
I don't know
right?
how to. I don't know how. It's so funny, but
it's one of those.
We
weird
have these
things.
conversations, and he's like, it's not even like you get. He's like, how can they defend that? How? I'm like, I do not know. I don't understand. It's not. It's right and wrong. I feel like a lot of the time.
Well, and what's happened, because you used to have reasonable Democrats, and actually, if you look back 20 years ago, a lot of those Democrats would be Republicans today.
My grandpa was a Democrat. My great grandpa was a Democrat, and I'm like, what? And they're like, that is what
That's
a Republican today.
It really is.
Yeah.
And what's happened, and you've heard, RFK has said this, is I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. Because they have shifted so extreme to the left and so intolerant of anything else that people are fleeing and coming over to the Republican Party. And that's why we saw the massive mandate that we did, where President Trump won every single swing state. The popular vote, the electoral vote across the board, people are realizing that we are the party of common sense. The other side has left. They have gone off the rails.
Well, and I was in Minnesota when the election happened. I was on a hunting trip, and there was we were with 8 or 10 guys, and obviously the ranch owners and stuff, and we're all hoping for Trump, right? We were all afraid to go to bed that night. We were all talking, and we were nervous.
Yeah.
We were nervous, and we were riding out to a tree stand. And we're all talking about it, and we're like, this is terrifying. And I says, the only thing I can think of is tomorrow either we'll win and we'll feel better, or we'll lose. But their policies and their ways have a shelf life. It cannot last.
Yeah.
It cannot. You cannot. Look at California. Look at how it's being ran. You run out of money. You run out.
Support. You run out of support.
You run out of safety. You run out of all these different things, and it's like this. I says to my buddies, I says, if they get another 4 years, this is going to eventually end one way or another, whether we take it back.
Yeah, exactly. That's what the point was.
Or it collapses, which is the terrifying thing. But I just don't believe their policies can. It's like I'm a business owner. I've started 14 companies. You cannot run a company like you run the United States. Yep. It is math.
Yep.
Take all the other abortion and all the other stuff out of it. The math doesn't work with their policies.
Yep.
Right.
And so I just think it's going to eventually, but the shocking thing to me is it does feel like a lot of people are, going that way. I have nieces and nephews that are growing up around the same values I have that are Democrats, and I'm like, what happened? But I just think they're uneducated.
Well, and it's the illusion.
I'm going to lose family now.
Well, it's the,
I'm sorry. This is what happens when you have Michelle Tanner on your podcast.
You have the illusion.
By the way, this is Chase Segmiller stepping in for Rick Trimmer today. Don't do any video with this.
Right. So, but like there really is this illusion, and I understand it, when it comes to young people, is that they're given certain amounts of information that seem like this inclusivity aspect is the loving route to go.
Right.
And it's like, I get that.
Right.
But then you have to look at all the other aspects of it.
Exactly.
And it's like, it's hard to try and steer them correctly because it is an illusion, and they're given a lot of information that keeps it looking that way.
Yeah.
But,
it's like love everyone.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
But then when, a guy's going into the, women's restroom with my daughter, it's like, I don't love him.
Well, it's one of those things like, no, that's not going to happen. You step, just stop before something happens. But it's like, I don't,
So that's the hard part is it's for me, it is there a solution?
Well, and I would bet that those nieces and nephews you're referring to were brought up in the public education system.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's a huge part of the problem.
That's why I travel with my kids.
Which is why I am so happy about this eliminating the U.S. Department of Education, because that should have no influence on my child's education here in St. George, Utah. Get Washington, D.C. politics out of our children's education. That's number one. That's going to help restore America, because they know that. The opposition knows that. The best way to infiltrate and shift a society, because as we know, Ronald Reagan also wasn't wrong when he said we are one generation away from losing freedom. We are always one generation away at a time, because that's all it takes is indoctrinating a generation
and enslaving
to think a different way, to think in terms of, I know it's almost become a conspiratorial type term to say Marxism, but Marxism tactics are truly this pitting you have an oppressor and the oppressed, right? And so that's what a lot of this education model that's come down from Washington, D.C., that's been mandated in order to accept those federal dollars here, that's what they teach. And we're not teaching correct history and principles in our school system anymore. Now, am I hopeful that maybe we can start shifting some of that and changing that narrative? Yes, the more we let go of those dollars, because that's what it comes down to, eliminate the federal dollars. And then even here at the state level, we need to be really conscientious of what's going on. And thankfully, we have shifted some of those seats on our state school board. We just elected Joanne Brinton, who's a good friend of mine from this area. So we do have some really solid people working to make a difference there at the state school board level. But again, it comes down, like, I love that you've traveled with your kids, because I'll guarantee your kids aren't going to turn out Democrat.
It's a four-letter word, apparently.
Yeah.
My 4-year-old, I was like, that's we were actually just talking. So we were going to stop when my oldest was, I think 13. When we first started out, we were like, let's go travel the world. We have enough money for 1 year. I think if things go okay, we can maybe parlay that into another, whatever. But we will hard stop when Castle's a teenager, my oldest. His name's Castle. And he's 13 now. And I talked to him, and I convinced him to go till he's 15. He'd like to stay around a little bit. He's had a couple tastes with COVID. Actually, COVID, he wasn't in school. We went to my parents' ranch and lived there.
Which is,
I love it.
that's
So
awesome.
he didn't. Yeah, we just stayed
Yeah.
there for a few months, and it was the best time in the world. You
Right,
know, I'm like, I don't need any of your crap. But he's got a couple tastes of that kind of life where he wants to. You know, it's natural, right? He's gonna want to
Yeah,
date
the
girls and go to
friends
play
and-
sports.
yep.
But I told my wife just a couple days ago. I says, "How much longer do we want to go?" And we're like, probably another year. And I says, I think the longer they're under us, I says, I 1,000% believe what we're teaching them is better.
Yeah.
You know, I
doubt.
don't have them get all their books out and read about all this and stuff, but we take them around, we show them places, we teach them, you know, to me, again, it's just like, I'm not a religious person. I grew up in the LDS faith for the first 20 years of my life, and I love it. I don't, you know, I'm not active, but I love the values.
Mm-hmm.
If you follow, you know, the values, you'll be a better person. That I know.
Yes.
You know, if you don't drink, you're going to be healthier. If you don't smoke, you're going to be healthier. If you don't cheat on your wife, life's going to be a little better. You know, all the it's like the basic principles. And that's what I feel with politics. I feel like I'm right. And I know every parent out there thinks they're right. That's the hard part. There's these parents that are stark Democrats who think they're right, and we're crazy, and we're, you know, bigots, and you know, all those good words. And it's like, it's shocking to me how there can be such two different sides of the coin. And I just don't know how. I really don't know how it ends.
Well, and that's why it is so important that we don't get sucked into the polarizing of each side, of where it resorts to, like you mentioned, the bigots, like the name calling, you know, where both sides will do it. And I've been called every name in the book from both sides of the aisle, right? But it doesn't get us anywhere. Like, where we truly grow and move forward is through robust, healthy debate, dialogue, being able to, you know, bounce ideas back and forth. That's where the ball moves forward. I just was having this conversation with a friend yesterday about the Constitutional Convention and how there were some people like the Samuel Adams who weren't there. Now, did we need people like the Samuel Adams who were notorious for, you know, yelling and name calling and things like that? Well, in some ways, yes, because he helped to rile up the revolution, right? But you also needed those level-headed people to actually be the ones sitting down to compromise, because that's what the Constitution was a compromise, because there were a lot of people who felt like it didn't go far enough and, you know, didn't have the separation enough. And so it did. They came together for that common good, which we are so grateful for today, to have the longest lasting Constitution and our republic that, you know, I believe was divinely inspired. And so I think the more we can get back to those principles of that healthy, robust debate and coming back to the Constitution, the further we'll get.
See, and I agree with that 100%, but I just can't do it. You know, I'm one of those people where if we're sitting down and I'm like, hey, this paper's white, and you're like, it's black, and I'm like,
am I colorblind?
I'm like, let's agree to disagree and
Which
go
is fine.
fishing.
Sometimes you do have to agree to
Because
disagree.
that, you know, it's like
Yes.
that's where I admire you and commend you, because a lot of the I'm like, I've had that where I'm, you know, had a couple drinks, I'm sitting out with my buddy, and I'm like, let's talk this out. You grew up in Utah. He's from Utah, from Pineview.
Mm-hmm.
Good friend of mine. You know, hunted and guns and everything, and now he's flipped.
Mm-hmm.
He's been in California for 20 years, right? Got him.
They got
That's
it.
what happens when you go to the dark
Yeah,
side.
yeah. And we sit down, and I'm like, oh man, let's be mature. Let's just have a conversation. And we start 5 minutes into it, and I'm like, you're an idiot. And then he's like, you're an idiot. And I'm like, am I? No, you are. And then I'm like, okay, let's stop.
I like that you evaluated yourself, though. You're like, am I?
I
No.
try. Yeah, I definitely am like, I try. You know,
Right.
like, how, explain to me how that's not white. And they're
Right.
like, well, from your angle, it's white, but from over here, it's gray, you know? And I'm like, what are you talking about?
And if it's over 50% gray, then it's black.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's one of those things where I understand what you're saying, but in reality, for me, and I'm grateful, like you said, that those people could sit down, because obviously that wasn't just, hey, you know, right to bear arms. Sweet. Everybody agrees? Cool. I don't know anymore. What are the other
Well,
ones? Right to free speech?
And to be fair, I highly doubt, in fact, I would go out and say 100%, nobody was trying to say that there's more than two genders back then. You know what I mean? Like, we have reached the level of insanity now that, like, no one would have even thought even 20 years ago that we would be debating if there's male and female and 1,000 other genders.
My grandpa passed away. There's actually a painting of him up there. So me and my grandpa were very close, and he passed away in 2019.
He's with Jesus fishing.
Yeah. My cousin drew that, and I love it. It's a beautiful picture. But I always say, I'm glad he got out.
Yeah.
You know, that was just 6 years ago.
I say that about all my grandparents.
But if he'd have went through COVID and Biden,
he would have gave him a heart attack then.
They're rolling in their graves, no doubt.
Yeah, but like you said, there's things that are coming to the table that are just fantasy.
Yeah, and it is black and white with some of these things. So don't get me wrong. Like, there are definitely hard truths that we should not shy away from, and we need people to stand up and say that.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
So,
and that's where I am. It's like I most people that I disagree with, I'm just like, bye. Like cut. You know, like, I don't even need to have this conversation. But some that I truly love, and I always think of it as like my mom. So I'm fallen away from the church. You know, I haven't gone to church for 20 years, but she still brings it up. You should go. And it's like, she's doing it out of love, right? She's trying to come at me from love and hasn't cut me off. And I'm grateful for that, you know? And so that's how I kind of feel about my Democrat friends.
That's an interesting,
keep trying to convert
them. To the ones that I love, and ones that I love, and I think there might be some hope, you know, then I keep trying. But yeah, it's very, it's just, and where I'm at now, like, if I would have started this podcast 2 or 3 years ago, I don't even know how long ago, but pretty recent, I would have been afraid to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's like, I'm going to lose followers. I'm going to lose, you know, and now it's like, I don't know whether it's, I'm done and I'm fed up and it's just like, whatever, or to be honest, it's probably because I think there's more people standing up.
Yeah.
And so I dare to stand up with them. 5-6 years ago, we all just sat down.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I might sit around the table with my dad and his cowboy buddies playing cards up at his cabin in New Harmony. And all they did was complain about politics. I don't watch the news. I haven't watched the news for 10 years.
Have those conversations.
But I sit down with them and they're like, I read the highlights. I still am kept in, you know, the know, but they sit around and they're just going crazy. Just so fed up, because you imagine these people are 70 years old, and can you imagine what they're seeing, you know, their America.
Oh man.
And I'm like, do something about it. And they're like, we don't know what to do, you know, and that's kind of where we all just kind of were quiet and didn't know what to do. And we're getting riled up.
Oh yeah.
I go around, and it sounds like, I don't know if conspiracy theorist or just redneck, you know, but
so good.
I spend a lot of time in hunting camps, and people are frustrated. The steam was let out of the kettle with Trump getting elected, thankfully, because we're done.
Yeah. Well, and I started saying back in 2020, like, every event I would speak at, that was my message, is we are past the point in this country of worrying about who we offend or losing our jobs, losing followers, losing our business. If we don't stand up and be a voice, we will have nothing left to defend. And I truly believe that.
Me too.
And that's why it's like, if I lose some followers, if I lose business, like, so be it. Yeah. That's not what I live for anyway, right? And so it's so important that we are banding together, and we are seeing that more and more, and it emboldens others to then feel free that they can also speak up. And we've proven that the silent majority, they're not silent anymore.
Yeah. I was talking to one of my buddies here in town, and he's done very well financially. And we were talking about it like 10 years ago, you know, still frustrated then, just, you know, this is annoying. This is, you know, whatever, whoever the president was then, I'm sure. And he's like, nobody's going to do anything. We're all, you know, the frog in the pot.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you have your little pool, you have your SUV, you have your nice little house. And it's like, I don't want to disrupt my little, you know, homeostasis. But you're right. It's like now we're getting to where I think it was, not quite there, but if it would have kept going, it was coming, to where it's in whatever that is. I'm not saying, like war or something, but it's like we're going to stand up and we're going because it seems like most of the groups that I'm going to get in so much trouble. I don't even know. Can I get canceled? I think you have to exist to be canceled, right?
You got to do actually something wrong. This is just public opinion.
Okay. Good. You're my PR guy. So.
Yeah, no, you're good.
That's not good when Jason's my PR guy.
I did get my entire YouTube channel wiped out after I did an episode about Spencer Cox. Just saying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well,
I don't know.
He must have some more power than I think he does.
But it's one of those things where I just feel like it is. It's just something has to change. And for me, it's not even, again, it's math. It's like we need this money, to stay in our country. We need, this. I mean, you look at the stuff that's coming out from. Was it Doge?
Yeah.
Is that how you say it?
Doge.
Yeah. It's like, what is happening? What is happening? How is this legal? I don't think it is, but isn't. But anyway, yeah, it's I'm cautiously optimistic, but I don't know that 4 years is enough.
Yeah,
that's
it'll
where
be
I kind of
interesting to see, what happens moving forward. And it's been actually really interesting to see, too. You brought up like the conspiracy theorists, and a lot of those quote unquote conspiracy theories have proven to be true, as we know. But I will say to that, just to caution people, because I've seen this happen a lot recently where people do go down these rabbit holes, and not to say that there's not truth within these rabbit holes, but they get so hyper focused on something that they then start to lose touch with reality. And I think we really have to continually check ourselves on this to make sure that we aren't just feeding ourselves our own bias, our own narrative, things, that confirmation bias. And we see this happen a lot with social media, which is why I love what your company does so much, because what happens with, most of us have probably seen the social dilemma of, of how the algorithms work, and it's constantly feeding you your own bias so that you're spending more time on the screens and online. And pretty soon, you don't even know what reality is anymore if you're not careful. And so I've seen some of my very own good friends fall into this trap where it's like, I can tell them over and over, I know that that's what you read, but it's just not true. And I know that because I witnessed this firsthand, but there's no convincing them because no, I read it online.
Yeah, my parents are a lot that way. My dad, I told him, he's like, everything I read, Rick, is this. And I'm like, Dad, that's on Facebook.
Yeah.
They're feeding you what you want to read. Because if something popped in there and said, you love Biden, what would you do? And he's like, I'd throw my phone. And I'm like, so that's why it doesn't. That's why it doesn't. And he's like, you mean to tell me that they can, and it was I had them watch.
Will manipulate the information
watch the Social Dilemma tonight, and then they're like deleting their accounts.
Yeah, for real.
Which great.
Well, yeah, I told them.
Get rid of social media.
Yeah.
I won't let my kids have it.
Yeah, me either.
I have a very love-hate relationship where it's like I feel like I have to be on there because with getting messages across with politics or business, like there's a place for it if we're using it as a tool.
For sure.
But yeah, it's very easy to get sucked into it and have it destroy lives.
And my 13-year-old all the time is like, I don't have a phone and my friends do. And I says, you'll have a phone when I think you're ready for a phone. I'm like, it's probably going to be 15 or 16.
Yeah. Or 36.
And he's like, what? And I'm like, the when you need a phone is when you are not near me and you need to call me.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're traveling the world with me.
Yeah.
You don't need a phone.
You don't need distractions.
He's like, well, I need to call my friends. I'm like, I don't care about your friends. I don't know your friends. I don't know what their political beliefs are.
Yeah, right. You don't want to steer in all kinds of weird directions.
Till I meet them, But yeah, it's this wild world. I commend you on your public service, right?
Thank you.
That
I
is,
appreciate that.
I would not wish that on my worst enemy. So.
Yeah, it's
keeps
not
on
for the
in.
thin-skinned at all. Yeah.
Yeah,
like, this was fun. Let's do it again.
Let's do it again. Yep, I'm doing it again.
Yeah, well, I think I could see how, it could be rewarding, but man, you just have to have a lot of confidence and a lot of, like know who you are and be
you
willing.
have to have a lot of grit too.
Yeah.
Like just getting beat up a lot, and just being like, no, I'm in the right. I'm good.
Well, and like I said, I just don't do well when, somebody came to me and was like, this is black. And I'm like, it's white. And they're like, no, it's not. And I'm like, shut up.
Go to the corner.
Like, what are you doing? Like, why are we talking? And I think that would happen a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it has its moments. I do truly love the service aspect of it because I do get to interact with a lot of people that I wouldn't get to otherwise. Sometimes maybe some of those I wouldn't have wanted to interact with otherwise. But for the most part in this area, overwhelmingly, we have amazing people. And selfishly, I actually love the personal growth that I get out of it because I think that's why I'm constantly always challenging myself and finding new things and other things to pile on my plate is because it's like I'm addicted to that growth.
Yeah.
Like if we are not constantly in the fire, how are we going to grow? Like comfort is the enemy to growth. And so, I guess I'm addicted to being uncomfortable, and it's certainly not a comfortable place in politics.
Well, and you look at Trump, he's a perfect example of somebody who does not have to be where he's at. A lot of politicians, Republican and Democrat, are lifers.
Yeah.
It's like Biden, he's been in it since forever, right? So that was his job. I'm sure he enjoyed it and whatever, but Trump he could be sitting on a beach somewhere playing golf, which he loves, right?
Right.
He's not getting paid. He donates his salary back. It's like, you just got to, nothing else. It's like if Biden did that, if they were like, hey, Biden's doing this for free, I'd be like, well, at least I respect that, but he's not, like none of them are. It's just, it's so black and white to me, but I don't know. I don't know whether I'm brainwashed. I always think that. I'm like, am I just crazy?
Yeah, that's this is the reason why, Rick, I have a really great relationship with the Lord is because then I turn to Him for all this nonsense.
Yeah, I don't have that.
And then I don't have any.
I used to go to my grandpa.
There you go. See,
but he was just more Republican.
But you'll get there. But that's the reason.
So Jesus is Republican. That's what you're saying.
Well,
you said it. You said it.
In
That better be the headline of this podcast. Jesus is Republican.
Jesus doesn't hold a political affiliate.
We're done.
He is for the right, and that's that's the whole. That's for the truth. That's what. That's all.
And that's what's hard is the Democrats. They think that they're being all inclusive. They think that they have all these things that they think are Jesus-like, and then I don't know. It's a slippery slope, but
it is.
But I think you nailed it, Chase, because that is like, why are we here?
Yeah, exactly.
We are here to seek truth, to find what is our purpose, what is our divine purpose, because I truly believe we each, as individuals, have a divine purpose for being here on this planet at this specific time in history. And how are we ever going to feel that or know that if we don't have a connection to our Father, to that higher power? And, with politics being so polarizing, it's really hard to know sometimes what is true, what is not true. We saw that during COVID where it was so confusing for people of like, well, my doctor's saying this, but I'm reading this, and, who do I believe, right? And that's where you saw so many people, that silver lining, coming back to their roots of finding God again and what is the truth, because I think you nailed that. That's what it has to come back to.
It's the only thing that steers me in this crazy, back and forth. And that's the thing. It's like the Democrat Republican thing about how, Democrats are the current day Republicans from back in the past, because all of that stuff shifts. And I can't really trust any of that because it's all for a specific goal in mind, and that's not Christ. And so I always have to revert back to being a disciple of Christ and a child of God, and really focusing on that and seeking those answers there.
Yeah. I love it.
Well, and since we already got a little bit controversial in regard to
little bit.
the LDS church, a lot of people were upset when the prophet came out and essentially encouraged people to get the vaccine. That was very confusing for people because
my father-in-law.
Some people took that as, oh, the prophet said it, I got to go do it because I follow the prophet, right?
That's not exactly what he said, though.
And then other people, well, no, exactly. And then it was highly encouraged, though, from the prophet and first presidency. And then other people, took it as, well, I'm leaving the church. This whole church must not be true because the prophet just said that, right? And for me, it comes down to the differentiation between culture versus the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Exactly.
The prophet is a human.
Yeah.
He can have his opinion about whether someone gets a vaccine or not. That doesn't make it directly from, thus saith the Lord, God told me to go get the shot. And so it's really important here in Utah, especially, I think, that we can differentiate that culture of the church, which is kind of the bureaucracy. It's constantly going to be changing and shifting with time versus what is actual Christianity and the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's like I said, I don't know that it'll ever be solved. I feel like I don't know if it's getting worse. I know my parents have always been stressed about it, but it feels like it's getting more. It feels like it's getting worse to me. Like the lines are moving so far away from reality.
And I think it's affecting more of us than it normally would. Like,
well,
it's
and
affecting more of the whole world than we normally would even be touched by it because we live in, rural part of Utah.
Well, and another good point is I was telling my wife the other day, I says, I never thought that I would get to an age where I worry about like Lake Powell's water level.
Yeah.
Like when you're 19, you're like, oh, water's down. I don't care. Still floats my boat. Let's go.
Right.
And now I'm like, man, we're in a drought. This is bad. And it's funny how you get older. I remember my parents when I was 10 and they're talking about politics. I'm like, who's the president? I don't know, but now as I get older, maybe I'm just, it affects me more and I worry about my children and the country that's going to be left behind, but man, it's a tough one. I don't know.
There's a point when knowledge is kind of a curse, like it gives you the ability to worry about more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, keep it simple.
When there's so much out there, like everybody can be a keyboard warrior, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They can all post a little, I actually saw my buddy in, do you know Jared Stocks?
I don't.
He went to Pineview. He's my age, but he actually just posted on his Facebook and he asked AI to analyze, what's Trump's book? The Art of the Deal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then a Democrat version of that. I can't remember the other book. But he says, analyze these books and tell me which one.
Do a comparison,
basically? And give me, and it's on his Facebook. And it's like Art of the Deal. He kept coming out on what the questions he was asking it. But it was like, that's pretty interesting. I think pretty soon in the next few years, you could ask AI, which is you could probably go out.
Oh, yeah. You could probably do that right now.
I was going to say, that'd be kind of a weird question to ask AI and say, ask it.
What do you want me to ask it exactly?
What's the right party?
Oh.
Or something like that, I'm just curious it would probably be all woke.
Well, they say that AI
can't be woke?
do that.
Okay. I'd be curious to know because, but, it's one of those things where it's just so obvious to me, but I don't know. That's probably ignorant.
Well, I think kind of back to what you're saying, though, with times getting so crazy and divisive and tumultuous, it actually reminds me of this very conversation that I was having with my 4-year-old this morning. She was holding up, I have this little plaque and she was walking around the house holding it. And she's like, Mommy, what does this say? And it's my favorite quote from Abraham Lincoln that says, a person will be just about as happy as they make up their mind to be.
For sure.
And I was explaining that to my 4-year-old of the one thing you can control is you get to choose if you're happy or not happy. And as the world gets more and more crazy, because I see some of my friends in different categories of this, where as believers, we read the Bible, we know about the end times, we know how crazy things can get and are going to get and probably progressively will get worse. But like, I'm excited to be like, I think I was probably raising my hand on the other side, like, sign me up for that. That looks awesome, amazing. And like, we get to choose how we handle these situations and how happy we're going to be about it.
Yeah.
And so that, for me, that's really what it comes down to.
It just always drops in the different standpoints of the certain politicians and perspectives. I even asked it from a Christian standpoint, like which one, and it's like there's no way to tell, you know. So I think it's built that way on purpose.
Yeah,
you know
ask if it's a Democrat or Republican. Say which party are you, ChatGPT?
My 11-year-old has asked Alexa that a few times.
Yeah.
Are you a Democrat?
What does it say?
It's like, I think she says something like, I cannot answer that question.
Yeah, it's always
like that.
Yeah, I don't have personal beliefs or affiliations.
Yeah.
However, I can provide information about both the Democratic and Republican parties.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't do me any good.
No, it'll just be different in 4 years. Let's be swapping beliefs and stuff. So whatever.
Yeah. It's like you said. I think that's a good, because I tell my wife, when we're I says, let's just keep traveling. Let's keep our kids close. And I always worried about. I was talking to one of my buddies, Ryan, that we talked about, and I was saying, when I first started out, I says I'm a little bit worried about homeschooling my kids, and they're going to be with me a lot. Are they going to be weirdos? And he's like, well, you're not a weirdo. A lot of the weirdo kids that were homeschooled back in the day had weirdo parents.
Yeah, the homeschool kids now are the cool kids. It's
Are
interesting.
they? Oh, good.
They really are.
Oh,
and
good.
then
There's hope.
These people just ingrained in the public school, unless they have parents that are really paying attention and like really strong.
Yeah.
It's hard for these public school kids, I think, to come out thinking straight.
I agree. And that's what I tell my wife, I says, at least my kids will come out of this travel, hopefully, I believe, with a good head on their shoulders that can, because I tell them all the time, the competition is pretty bleak. I told,
oh man, nowadays.
I told him, I says, your daddy, for me to retire at 36, it's like, I'm not a genius or anything. It's like, I just outworked a lot of people and, took some chances that people weren't willing to take. And that's getting easier.
Yeah.
A lot of people are just lazy.
Well, it's a trick.
Yeah.
It's a really big trick, and I think I used to look at it differently when I was younger. Like I definitely sat more on the liberal aspect when I was younger, just because of like what I did for a living and where I lived, and I always wanted to live in a city, things like that. So the perspective of what you get from like certain aspects of those different political parties is interesting, and so the support of people that don't do much is something that a lot of people look at. And I'm like, I don't want to do a whole bunch, and I kind of want to be taken care of, and it's like,
well, that's most cities, right?
Yeah,
that's why most cities are Democrat.
And that's how that works out, and so it just automatically puts you where you have the most support. And I get that. So like, until you separate yourself from that, you won't really see it that way. But once you've seen both sides and both perspectives and you've lived in both, you really kind of break it down to where truth is, and that's...
Yeah, they're the frog in the pot, right?
Yeah,
They're
exactly.
just kind of boiling and they don't know it, I think.
And that's exactly where it happens. And, I felt so separated, though, from almost anything, including animals, nature, and stuff like that in the city. So, like, it drew me in and also kind of crippled my ability to want to fight. You know what I mean? So there's a lot to it that I've evaluated, but,
Well, and that's where, coming back to M42 Adventures, it's like, I know no matter what, whether you're Republican or Democrat, if you're Democrat and want to come on one of our adventures, I'm not going to,
no.
belittle you or be, ignorant.
But just know, Jesus is a Republican.
Yeah.
We're definitely getting canceled for that one.
That is my favorite line of this whole episode.
I'm glad that's what you took from what I was saying.
When you listen back, it's going to say, I'm going to say my last sentence, and then it's going to go right into my next sentence. You're like, wait a minute, I said something
What
right
Rick
there.
doesn't know is I'm making a short of that. It's going on Instagram.
Yeah.
Jesus is a Republican. That's all I'm just going to say.
Make shirts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, man, we're in trouble.
But yeah, it's the one thing that I do know for sure is that if you get outside, whether you're Republican or Democrat, and like I said, a lot of our hunting camps and stuff, we have a couple occasional Democrats wander in, and we're kind to them. We're nice to them. We we're civil. We have a good time.
Give them some tissues for their alligator tears.
We give them some meat because they're poor hunters.
Yeah.
So we'll all kind of chip in for them. But to get outside and to spend time outdoors, and just like you said, get away from your screen, get away from the BS, all of it, both sides, is healthy.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong. There's nothing bad going to come out of that.
No.
And that's what I do know. And that's why, I don't watch the news, and I try to,
the other thing too that's interesting, and it's always funny because wherever I go in the world, I remember back when Trump was president the first time, we were in New Zealand and Australia, a lot of that. And people would come up to us and they're like, hey, you know, Trump's over there. What do you think? And I'm like, here we go. I'm like, you know, I like him. You know, I'm a big guy, so I'm like, I could probably take you. If they were taller than me, I'm
Right.
like, I like the other guy. You know.
Who else is there?
But I get asked that a lot, and you know, everybody was nice.
Yep.
Everybody was respectful. Some guys, you know, were like, "Oh, we don't really like him. He's scaring us." And I'm like, "That's fine. No worries. You know, I don't want you to be scared, but I think it's okay." And then some were like, "We love him. You know, he's the only guy." I remember it was when Kim Jong-un was all off his rocker.
Yeah, he gets uppity sometimes.
And he's like, they're like, I don't think anybody else could be in office that could handle him and his threats because he's like, Trump says my button's bigger, you know? He's like, that's how you have to,
you know,
he's like, that's how you have to fight those crazy people. And I'm like, I agree,
dude,
but we probably should move on because we never know, you know, I don't want to, you know, go too far down this road, but the world's beautiful. My point is the world's beautiful. Everybody's trying to do the best they can. Whatever walk of life, most people, and you know, whether you come, whatever political affiliation you have, most people are trying to do what's best for them and their family, right? So
I think that is so important, though, what your business does, because I mean, not to sound too voodoo-ish over here or hippie, but energy is all around us. Like, we are all energetic beings, right? All living things produce an energy. That's why you connect more, you know, with certain people than others, depending on those energy levels. These phones, TV screens, they highly detract from those elevated energy levels. I truly believe that. And getting out into nature and connecting with the earth's energy, that's how we rejuvenate ourselves.
Absolutely.
And if we're constantly being drained by these, how are we ever going to do anything productive? So
yeah, and I think if you get outside, 100% agree with that. And I think if you can, you know, get outside, I think the way I'd bring this full circle is if you are listening out there and you haven't turned off yet and you're a Democrat, good for you.
You're a Democrat. You just have to throw that out.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. And I would highly encourage you to come out to one of our adventures and, you know, let's have an open conversation.
We don't discriminate.
Yeah, at all. And we don't even need to talk about politics.
No.
You know, that's the other thing. It's like,
don't.
I can ride a horse with you or I can go surfing with you.
Yeah.
And as long as you're a nice person and treat others well, I'm good.
That's
you know,
the key.
if you're rude,
If you're disrespectful, we'll refund and you can leave.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I think it's amazing what you're doing. I'm going to chat with my wife and have you get on hers. I think that'd be a really good conversation for her woman audience to hear, you know, a lot of what you got going on. So how do people reach you? Your podcast, which may or may not be.
Yeah, so I know it's not as active right now. So probably the best way is just on my social media, my Instagram. I'm Michelle Tanner USA. Put a lot of content out several times a week on there. And that also has links to the Michelle Tanner podcast. MichelleTannerUtah.com is my website. So yeah, reach out. Would love to connect with anyone.
Yeah, and same with me. You know, if you listen to anything on here and you think I'm a crazy redneck bigot,
let me know.
send me a message. Send me a message. Let's chat.
I really need to know like what people think about me.
Well, it's like let's chat. You know, and if I tell you the paper's white and it's white, I'm gonna block you.
Yeah, that's the end of that
It's healthy to have boundaries, though. Like that is the other thing I've realized is although I can love anyone and, you know, be quote unquote friends, if someone is only there to tear down and that's it, and we see this a lot online, I've gotten to the point that it's like, I'm not keeping you. Like, I don't want you disturbing my peace and my energy by having to see your negative comments all the time, right?
Yeah, and I'm naturally a people pleaser, like just social guy. And that's one thing I've gotten better the last few years, hanging out with a lot of these guys, Ryan specifically, where, you know, he's like, dude, if you get trolls and people coming in, it's like, just block them, man. Don't give them your energy. And I'm like, check. And
Great
everybody
advice.
should do that.
Yep.
If I happen to be your troll and you don't like what you're hearing and it's making you sad or bothered or
If you
frustrated,
think the paper is black,
if you think the paper's black, block me, you know, and take care, you know.
You gotta
it's the
protect
ones
your
the
peace.
ones that always drive me crazy are the ones who try to sit there and really convince, like try to
Gaslight you.
Is that what it is? I don't know. Is that? I don't ever know what that is. My wife says I do that sometimes, and I'm like,
when you try and change somebody's like reality, like convince them that something that they believe.
kind of like what they did wrong was their fault.
Yeah, well, that's exactly how that works. So like when somebody comes at you and then you're like flipping it back, that's gaslighting.
Yeah. I'll tickle my throat, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, if anybody out there is listening and wants to have a chat, good luck trying to get a hold of me. First of all,
I can barely get a hold of him.
I was gonna say, to be honest, like I'm not avoiding you. I'm not avoiding you because of your political belief. I'm just not on social media much. But
everybody knows how to get a hold of Rick,
Yeah,
and nobody can. So
yeah. I had Cisco just text me, and he's like, "Why is your Jeep in the parking lot?"
He has no idea you even are here.
Yeah, he's like, I'm back for a few days, but anyway, yeah. So I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. I think hopefully this was good for people. It was actually good for me. So whatever.
Yeah, no, it's good.
It's good for me to be a little more convicted in my convictions. That
makes sense.
We just have to get you to watch The Chosen now.
I know.
So work on that.
It puts some personality to like the apostles and stuff like that. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on. I think it was healthy for me I think it's better for people to not be afraid, is the biggest thing. If you believe in something, it does feel like to me a lot of times that the left is the loudest. I guess that's why we're called the silent majority, right?
Some on the right, I've learned, are very loud too.
For sure, for sure.
Depends on the
day
on
or
the issue.
Yeah,
yes.
for sure. But I appreciate you coming in. I think this was, wherever you stand out there, like you don't necessarily listen to me and what if you can have an open conversation, that is best. To just turn off and shut down and is not the right way. And I'll try to do better, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Well, I want to come on one of these adventures. So
Yeah,
let me
yeah.
know. Let me know what the next one is.
Which one?
Like, yeah, we have
all
some
of
fun
them.
ones.
What's your
Like-
favorite kind of?
Yeah, what do you
adventure?
like? What's your?
I love
what do you-
all things outdoors.
Okay.
I mean, Chase
Yeah.
knows I love guns.
Yeah.
She likes
I
dirt
love
bikes.
dirt
We got to do the dirt
biking.
bike thing soon.
Yeah. We've got some good ones planned. So yeah, I'll we'll get you out there. We do
Perfect.
a lot of local ones too. I'm trying to get him. We actually bought everything.
Yeah, no, I just need the place to do it.
Gosh.
Yeah.
But we're doing a culinary one.
And
So outdoor, over the fire.
Sign me up for that one.
With
I'm going to teach
Chase.
everyone how to make outdoor cuisine in Dutch ovens.
All Dutch ovens. We bought. How many Dutch ovens did we buy?
We have 12, I think. 12.
No, it's more than that, wasn't it?
No, we bought 12 and 12 skillets.
Oh, skillets. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm excited for that one because
Yeah.
he's amazing. We went up and did a couple events where he cooks at them, and it's so yeah. There's lots of stuff going on. It's just trying to get us outside and hanging out, and that's the goal, right? So
And we
you're
just
welcome.
do this
You're welcome anytime.
Thank
to bring
you.
people outside. Remember that. We give the inspiration to come outside. We don't want everybody just staying on YouTube and
Yeah.
stuff.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? Like, come have an adventure.
Turn off this podcast and
Yes.
get outside.
Yeah, go into your own public lands and have a good time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. Well, appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, so there you have it. That was very interesting. That went a lot of different ways that I was not planning on. Obviously, you saw some sides of me that maybe you didn't know or recognize, but it is what it is. Love me or hate me. I'm going to be who I am and stand up for what I believe in, and that's where a lot of those segments went. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If you didn't, again, I'm open-minded. Let's have a conversation. Send me some messages. Let's have a chat. I do not, I love, everybody. Within reason, and so just because we have a differing opinion on politics doesn't necessarily mean that we can't be friends. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully you got something out of that. Thank you, Michelle Tanner, for coming into the studio. Great conversation. I'm excited to get you on my wife's podcast and see where that conversation goes. I'm actually wearing her shirt today, Revitalized Womanhood. If you haven't checked that out, go check that out. Shameless plug there. And thanks for listening to the M42 Adventures Podcast. I am your host, Rick Trimmer, and I appreciate your support. We're doing amazing things here. We're expanding. Go check out the Genesis. Again, that's our online community. We just did our giveaway last week. We got to 250 members, and we're bringing a couple here to Utah to Elevation 40 Zion, the most wish-listed Airbnb in Utah. And we're going to have an adventure with them. We're going to shoot guns, go hiking, ride UTVs, have a private outdoor chef cook us dinner on a fire, and it's going to be an amazing experience. So we're going to continue to be doing giveaways like that. Probably another one at 500. Same kind of giveaway is what we're trying to plan. Go check out Elevation 4 Design, see if that's a place you'd like to go. And again, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one. Have a great weekend.